It took a while, but Tamron has finally offered us a new prime lens again. And once again, it's only an f2.8 lens. Even Tamron's zooms are brighter. But f2.8 is not a problem in this lens we are discussing today. In fact, it's the standard. This is Tamron's new 90mm 2.8 macro lens for Sony's E mount and Nikon's Z mount. It's Tamron's first lens to be offered simultaneously for both mounts. Today we will take a closer look at it. I'm David, you are watching Da Vision in English, and let's go. While researching for this video, I realized how expensive the available macro lenses for Sony's E mount still are. Even the old Sony 90mm 2.8 G USS here in Germany still costs about 900 euros. And Sigma's 105mm 2.8 macro hasn't gotten cheaper due to the lack of competition. It's even more expensive than it was at the end of 2020 when it was released. For Nikon, the 105 2.8 isn't as old, but it's at 900 euros still pricey. The new Tamron is supposed to launch at 700 euro as a recommended retail price. That's quite something good, especially since Tamron lenses usually don't keep their initial prices for a long time. The lens is relatively small at 126mm, more compact than the Sony, the Sigma or the Nikon lenses. And at 630 grams, it's also lighter than most others. As it's typical for Tamron, the filter size is 67mm. One odd thing is the small front glass, but let's see if that negatively affects the lens's performance. The lens features a focus limiter switch with 3 positions and a button you can either program via the camera body or reprogram using Tamron software through the USB-C port on the lens. However, I find it disappointing that they didn't include an AF/MF switch on the lens, which is essential for a macro lens from my point of view. Instead, you have to set it via the menu. It works, but it's annoying. What I do really like through is the lens hood, which comes with a sliding window so you can rotate the polarizing filters without removing the lens hood. The build quality is excellent overall. The lens is made of high quality plastics and has a small rubber seal around the mount. It's protected against dust and light splashes. What I don't like as much, however, is the focus ring. It's just too easy to turn for me and offers no resistance, so I often overshoot the point I'm aiming for focusing. I'm not used to such a soft and imprecise focus ring from Tamron lenses. But a nice feature here again is that via the USB-C port and software you can switch the focus ring between a linear response tied to the degree of rotation or a faster exponential response tied to the speed you are turning it. The lens is constructed with 15 elements and 12 groups and is complemented by an aperture blade with 12 rounded blades. Most other lenses of this kind come with 9 aperture plates, so this might help deliver a rounder and softer bokeh when you step down your aperture. Naturally, for a true macro lens, the reproduction ratio is 1:1, and with the 90mm focal length, it achieves this at a distance of 23 centimeters, which works very well and is quite comfortable of a working distance. Another important note, like the Sigma, this Tamron lens doesn't have an optical image stabilizer. It relies entirely on the camera's IBIS system, and so you notice that in macro photography from time to time that an optical stabilized lens is just a little bit smoother to work with. But let's take a look at the optical performance. In the usual sharpness tests I take, the lens performed very well. The sharpness is impeccable in the center of the frame, even wide open, and it remains strong towards the edges. While there is maybe a slight drop off in sharpness, it's far from being unsharp at the edges. You can see still every little detail, even at 61 megapixels resolution. Stopping down to f4 brings a tiny bit more crispiness and contrast, but beyond that, there's no visible improvements in image quality. In practice, the f2.8 often results in a very shallow depth of field in macro photography, so you end up stopping down anyway to get more in focus at close distances. Nonetheless, the lens performs admirably wide open and in my opinion doesn't need to shy away from Sigma's extremely good 105mm f2.8. Both are extremely sharp macro lenses. I would have loved to compare it to the Sony 90mm as well, but given the lower price and the newer design, I expect the Tamron would win. Sony's older lenses aren't exactly known for their uncompromising image quality, and when I had the Sony, the biggest problem for me was the autofocus, which we will talk about later. In practice, the photos look very good with the Tamron. They are razor sharp with great contrast, good color reproduction and excellent optical properties. For instance, there was no chromatic aberration visible anywhere. Not even in high contrast situations with leaves against the bright sky with sun in the frame or in bokeh transitions. Even at 2.8. Macro shots showed minimal color fringing in the autofocus area, the so-called loca. What I also really liked is the bokeh. At f2.8 you can't really see the 12 aperture plates, but the bokeh is still impressive. The bokeh circles are pleasantly clear with no onion rings and only slight outer edges. The circles remain even round towards the edge of the frame, which I didn't expect at all, given the small front element. The cat's eye effect at the edges is also quite subtle. Stopping down the lens shows off the 12 aperture plates at work. Even f4 or f5.6 or f8, these circles remain almost perfectly round. Given that such lens will primarily be used stop down for macro work, this feature is very important and Tamron likely thought the same. Also, bokeh in practice looks very nice and soft with smooth transitions into and out of the focus area. No busy bokeh background here that could distract you from your subject you are shooting. Vignetting is present as f2.8. Yeah, it's quite pronounced here, as seen in the sharpness test already, but f4 it's almost gone, and by f5.6 it's completely gone. And there's little distortion, barely even noticeable. The Sigma lens was worse in this regard. What hasn't impressed me that much is the lens's performance against direct light. While there were few or no flare issues from side lighting, what is really good, when a light source is in the frame there can be a significant ghosting seen. That's the reflections from the lens's own elements inside the lens. However, I think good flare resistance from the side lighting is more important for macro photography, since this rarely involves shooting directly into the sun or a bright light source. Oh, and by the way, this lens also can create nice sun stars too. What I really liked is the autofocus of the new Tamron lens, which brings up the biggest differences from the two other lenses. First, this lens features a VXD autofocus motor, a fast and modern voice coil motor that moves the elements quickly and smoothly around. Macro lenses often struggle with autofocus since there is a huge distance that the lenses have to travel. And the old Sony had a slow and sluggish autofocus. The Sigma wasn't perfect either. The Tamron, however, is fast, silent, precise and just fun to use in almost every aspect. Another thing I like more than the Sigma here is that it has little focus briefing. The Sigma was really bad at close distances. It has completely shifted its focal length when you are close focusing, what was really distracting. Here it's not completely absent, but it's way better under control when you are focusing around the minimal focus distance, maybe for a nice macro detail shot in a video. That makes it tricky with the Sigma, makes it more easier with the Tamron here. My Canon EF 100mm also does this, but this is older, and the Tamron is way better in this regard. In conclusion, there are only two things I think could have been done better. There should have been an AF/MF switch on this lens, and the lens could handle direct light better. Though there's not a huge issue in practice. Everything else leaves little room to criticism. And when you factor in the 700 euros price, this is a very well-rounded package and probably the most appealing macro lens currently available for Sony's E-mount and maybe for Nikon's Z-mount as well. Though I don't have enough experiences with Sony's 105mm 2.8 to say for sure. With the Tamron, you can't go wrong if you need a macro lens. Links are in the video descriptions down below, and if you buy through these links, you're supporting this channel at no extra cost to you, which helps me continue making videos like this one for you. What I'm still missing through are more prime lenses from Tamron. That's a good start, but I want to see f1.4, f1.8 lenses. They are always quite convincing back in the DSLR days, and I just miss them, having them as an alternative to Sony or Sigma lenses. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the lens down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell if you don't want to miss any future videos. Here are 2 more videos you might want to check out next. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.